Okay, so the number one thing holding back, really good players today, I really believe is their own echo chamber. And this is something that's incredibly relevant in today's political climate. It's incredibly relevant because of the fact that the content that we receive and the information we get is so algorithmic driven. Meaning, as you browse Facebook and Instagram, all the various websites you watch, these sites kind of spit back content that they think that you will like, not content that they, think that will challenge your ideas or make you think a different way, but content that you think that you will like based on previous content. So for example, if you're a very conservative political beliefs, you're going to keep getting conservative political articles, commentary, views, so on and so forth, which is going to reaffirm your own beliefs. The same thing if you're a liberal or a libertarian or so on and so forth. So the data that's collected spits it back. And I've seen the same exact thing happen in poker. Poker has its own echo chambers. You get a bunch of 5 or 6 people together who really are like, we're going to work on the GTO aspect of our game, and they approach it from a certain perspective. And they start to trade advice and they look at what's not that to be suboptimal, when in fact, and then you have also people who are like, oh, I'm a field-based player and I've been playing field-based poker for so long, and they have their 5 or 6 field-based friends that talk about specific spots and like, oh, these math guys are ridiculous. These math guys have no value. You're living in no echo chambers. And I see this in poker more than anything else, especially because I have like an outside perspective just because of Beyond Tells. I get to see inside each of these echo chambers. So one of the things I really need to say is you need to get out of your echo chamber and not consume, discuss, and like have poker conversations from one source or one collective group. And there's 3 big reasons why. And the first is being right in poker is way different than it used to be. So for such a long time, poker was at its infancy in terms of its knowledge and our understanding of the game. And at that point, the echo chambers were interesting because of the fact that most players weren't even paying attention to the game. They'd sit down, they basically gambled, they would have fun. And if you had a basic understanding of core competencies, position, understanding hand strength, relative hand, all these simple things, you'd have an edge in your game. You would be significantly better than a lot of players out there. But now the game has completely changed, and that basic foundational understanding of poker is more available to the masses, and people understand it a lot more competently than we ever thought. And in order to really get better, you need to think about how these specific echo chambers or these specific groups or norms or buckets of poker players is thinking. And people have completely different approaches to the game, even at a higher level. After playing poker for 15, 20 plus years, players are still falling into trends and norms that can be exploited. But if you just get in your information from the same source, you're not really getting that level of feedback. Also, there's different strokes for different folks, which is number 2. I mean, the reality is I can explain a concept to you in a way where you're like, oh, that really fits into my game. And someone else could explain a concept that really fits. And you're like, oh, you know what, Blake had a point here, but I like this person's opinion here. And it's just good to get those different opinions. If you don't have them, you just get this tunnel version of poker that I see so many players finding themselves in, where their commentary, it's like, I know that you read this book, and this book, and that's kind of it. You need to step out of that. It's just so vital to personal development and growth in this game. Also, the most important thing out of everything is you need to understand how other people approach the game. This is really the most important part, especially for you live poker players. If you want to be like this exploitive or exploitation-driven player, you really need to be aware of the other spheres of thinking in poker. And, by looking at the game from different sources and getting your information from different sources, you get to see that, wow, these players, even though they may be wrong, or your perception is that their approach is wrong, they're approaching the game in this unique way. And instead of being like, oh, what idiots, you want to say, I'm interested to understand why they're thinking that way. Because at a broader conceptual level, it can be incredibly valuable when playing against those players. So for example, as I'm making an entry into playing more tournament poker, I go out of my way to try to understand the trends in these higher stakes tournaments and understand how players approach. And, as a long-term cash game player, like I saw some of the tournament play that I was exposed to be really passive and just really what I considered to be bad poker. And I was like, this is just bad. And then I understood the theory and the process behind why they were doing the things that they were doing. And I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. I don't necessarily agree with it. It doesn't fit my style or my unique edge of the table, but I understand why they're raising to 2.2x in this spot. And if I just didn't go into that echo chamber or go into that sphere of learning, I would have never been able to actually understand why they are doing what they're doing. So with poker, I always try to, and in life really, I always try to approach this, isn't that interesting as like my catchphrase. Like whenever I see a player that I respect, like kind of take a line or discuss a hand, and I'm like, isn't that interesting? And I try to conceptualize why they think the way that they're thinking and not try to just be like, you're wrong, I'm right, that's it. And then we see this in politics, right? Like, no, this person's not a complete idiot and this person's not a complete idiot. This person has some idiot sides to them. This person has some idiot sides to them. It's usually somewhere in the middle. And it's the same thing with poker strategy, and it's the same way with approach to poker. And it's really this game, from my perspective, is about understanding the person across from you. And if you truly want to understand the person across from you, you should be very interested in understanding how that person gets their information, what echo chambers they live in, where they're digesting stuff, and you should be really getting your hands dirty there because it's just going to make you a hell of a lot better at exploitation. That's about it for my rant about echo chambers. Also, be careful of your echo chambers online and in your Facebook feeds and all that stuff. It's driving me nuts. It's just the world we live in. I get all of my news is biased. It's driving me crazy. Both sides, liberal sides, conservative sides, bias. I want unbiased, clear, just tell me the facts. Anytime you see a headline that's like, oh my God, the amazing thing that this person said or the dumb thing that this person said, they're approaching it from a biased perspective just because the headline is leaning towards something. Whole nother discussion, not gonna get into politics, maybe on another website one day I'll get into that whole thing. Learn about players so you can exploit them. I'm done. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you subscribe. We are releasing between 2 to 3 videos every single week. Also, make sure you head over to schoolofcards.com/value. The link's below in the description. It's basically our value email list where I do random webinars for free once or twice a month. I also answer questions, submit hands, and we release videos that we don't always release on YouTube. So make sure you check out schoolofcards.com/value, enter your name and email, and I'll keep you up to date.